I'm going to show how to make this star shape using Affinity Photo's procedural texture filter. After I had finished my poly star shape, I wasn't satisfied with it. I wanted to make an actual star shape like you can see on this background. And I know you can get one in Affinity Designer or other software that does vector graphics, but I wanted to do one using the procedural texture filter. And so I searched out, I figured this must be a common shape, and after searching for it, all I came up with was my own YouTube channel. So I figured I was on my own. So I'm sure there are other people who have this out there somewhere, but I couldn't find it, so I came up with my own, and it seems to work pretty well. And after some tweaking, I found out you can get quite a bit of functionality out of this thing. So you can get a basic star. If you modulate it a little bit, you can get some other patterns that are don't even look like stars. And then depending on whether you use a step function or an oscillator function or a smoothstep function, you can get different patterns as well. So there are a lot of things you can do with this to pick up different shapes and patterns. In order to make the star shape, the idea I had was to take the basic polygon shape, rotate it by half of the sweep angle, and then subtract that from the original polygon shape. Here's what that might look like with a triangular star shape, and here's what that might look like with a five-sided star. To get started, I'll start with a new 1024 by 1024 document. So make sure it's in RGB mode and create that. I will fill that with black, and I'm going to add a live procedural texture filter. I'll add a single equation and assign it to all three channels. I'm going to add a single real input, I'll call it scale, and set it equal to 4. I'll add a integer number input. I'll use the input n and label this one sides, so that will be the sides of the polygon. I'll set that equal to 5. I need to rotate this, so I'll add a pH for phi. I'll call this angle for my angle input. Next, I'll add a variable s, which will equal 360 degrees divided by n. So this is sort of the angle that's swept by each side of the polygon. Next, I'll add a coordinate system, var, v equals vec2 of rx comma ry. So I'll use the relative x and y times my scaling factor a divided by the width of the document in pixels, w. Okay, so there's the coordinate system. Now what I really want is this to be a repeating pattern, so I'm going to take the fraction of this and I'm going to subtract off 0.5 to center the 0 in the middle of each square. And now since I'm using Rx and Ry, I have to drag this over until I get rid of all those negative numbers. Okay, so there's my repeating pattern of the coordinate system. Next thing I have to do is get an angle from this, and so I'll use the variable, I'll call it theta, and that's equal to the a tangent 2 function, the arc tangent 2 function, which will take inputs of v dot y and v dot x. I want to add my angle input to this so that I'll be able to rotate it. So add a phi value to this. Now I'm going to create another variable for a second angle, theta 2, and that's going to equal theta plus s over 2. So I'm going to have this rotated by half of the angle that the side of the polygon takes up. Now I'm going to create two theta prime values, one for the theta variable and one for the theta 2 variable. I call it TP for the theta variable, and that's just equal to theta minus s times the floor of theta over s plus 0.5. And now another one just like it, so I'm just going to copy this TP variable and paste it here and change it to TP2 and change it to theta 2 for the two theta values. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is to take the length of V and multiply by the cosine of TP. If I look, I can already see the pentagon shape. It looks like a good polygon. Now I want to subtract off the other polygon value. So I'm going to just take this and put a parentheses around it and subtract off I times the cosine of TP2. And parentheses. I need to add a slider, and I'm going to use a -1 to 1 slider. That way I will be able to either subtract or add to the polygon. So this will be sort of a shaping function. I'll call it shape. Sort of intensifies it. Now it gets darker when I do that, and so it will be useful, I found, to have a multiplier on this. So I'm just going to multiply this by b. And I'll add a real input b, and I can set it to 1 for now. The other thing that will be helpful is sometimes I'm going to want to make it subtract off an even larger value than just the cosine. So I'm going to multiply this by 2. And that'll give me a little more flexibility in my shaping. It'll change the shape more radically if I do that. I've got this all set up now, so I'm going to wrap it in a step function. And I need to add a variable for the edge. And so I'll add a 0 to 1 slider, call it by the letter E, and label it edge. This one I'm going to label levels. Now, as I adjust E, I get my polygon different sizes. I can rotate it to put the point up. So set this to 270 degrees, and then I can get different polygons, just as before. But now, with my shaping function, I can start to make shapes. Now I have to bring the edge down as I adjust this. And to get just the perfect star shape, it's a little bit tricky to make it flat on the top. I can zoom in a little to adjust this so it's just about perfect. If I go up to more sides, I have to bring this way down to compensate if I want a long star. So that's where these levels come in. Okay, so I can add more points to the star. And then I can get some sort of wild patterns if I make it into, I can actually sort of make the points of the star into lines. Now it might be useful to have a fine control on this shaping function, but do that later. Yeah, so I can make this really big, and then if I make this really big, then I can add some really fine lines to this, like that. Now I want to show you how to draw just the edge of the star, so the stroke of the star. And it turns out that the usual way to do this would be to subtract off a value, and then take the absolute value, and then use the edge function. However, the procedural texture filter has a 4-edge smooth step function that can be used to do this in a better way. So I'm going to show how to do it with that. So I'm just going to change this to a smooth step, and I'm going to add another variable which will be the thickness of the line. It'll be a 0 to 1 slider, and I'll call it E2. And this will be the line thickness. And I'm going to set that to a pretty small value for now. And what I'll do up here on the smooth step then is to choose my E minus E2, and then I'm going to add another E minus E2, and then I'm going to have an E plus E2, and another E plus E2. And those will be the 4 edges. Notice these two are the same, so that will be a sharp edge going up, and then these two are the same, so it'll be a sharp edge coming down again. So there's my outline, and so this controls the thickness of the line, and this controls the size of the star. I can make thin lines or thick lines, and then control the shape of these. And then if I set this to an even number, I can make more shapes that are sort of more complex than just what you might think of when you think of a star shape. Like that. Cool. I got to add a gradient adjustment to this. Use the gradient map to add some different colors. Now the other thing I could do, instead of a smooth step, I could make a oscillator. So I'm going to add a new equation, copy all of this and paste it here. Turn off the alpha, and turn off the RGB on this one, and turn it on this one. I'll delete all of the edges and just replace this with an oscillator, OSC. And then I have that, but now as I bring up the levels, I get more levels of oscillator. I can change this like this or like that, and then I can bring up the sides on this thing or increase the scale. So now you can get a range of effects like that as well. Okay, I've tried a few more things. I tried quantize and some other stuff, but I think there's a lot of things you can do with this. Oh, the other thing I didn't talk about is to set up 2 independent coordinate systems, and then, you know, like I did with the multiform shape that I did in a previous video. So if you do that, you should be able to get a even more variety of shapes out of that. So anyway, that's how you can do a star with procedural textures. If you come up with something cool, I'd love to see you post it in the comment section, and I'll try it out. And then otherwise, let me know if you have any comments or questions. And thanks for watching.